You know, when you think about where Western civilization really kicks off, your mind probably goes straight to one place, ancient Greece, right? Philosophy, democracy, epic poetry, it all seems to start there. But what if that's not the actual beginning of the story?
What if the story of ancient Greece didn't even start with the Greeks? In this explainer, we're going to rewind the clock. We're going way back, before Socrates, before Homer, even before the legendary Trojan War. We're going to uncover this incredible, almost forgotten civilization that honestly laid the groundwork for everything that came after. A world that just blossomed and then was completely wiped out by the very people we think of as the first Greeks.
Okay, just look at this thing. It's carved from ivory, decked out in gold, probably a goddess, maybe a noble lady from ancient Crete. But seriously, look at the style here. The elaborate hairstyle, the fitted top, that tiered skirt, it feels almost modern, doesn't it? This is not some crude little trinket from a primitive culture. No way. This is the work of a seriously sophisticated people, and they were thriving 1,000 years before Athens even had its golden age.
So who were these people? Well, they were the heart of what we now call the Aegean civilization. And their story, Europe's first great civilization, it all starts on the island of Crete with the legendary Sea Kings.
All right, let's put this into perspective for a second. We're talking around 3000 BC. At this point, most of Europe is still kinda in the Stone Age. You know, small farming villages, stone tools, the whole deal. But down in the Aegean, because they were right next door to the great powers in the Near East, something totally different was happening. Something incredible. They were jumping into the Bronze Age.
And these Cretans, they were just fantastic learners, master adapters. This slide shows it perfectly. On the left, you've got these stone vases from Egypt, the superpower of the day, right? And on the right, well, those are Cretan copies. They literally saw what their neighbors were doing, picked up cool tech like the potter's wheel and the closed oven, and then just made it their own. It shows you they were connected, they were curious, and man, were they clever.
All of this cleverness led to what we call their Grand Age, around 1600 BC. I mean, they were building these huge, sprawling palaces like the one at Knossos. And get this, they weren't even fortified. That tells you they felt pretty darn secure. Their ships were everywhere, their navigation skills were top-notch, so much so that their rulers got the nickname the Sea Kings of Crete. Oh, and they even developed their own system of writing, which is so cool and also so frustrating because we still can't read it today.
And the art, wow, it reached a level that is just breathtaking. Take a look at these. These are the Vaphio cups. Solid gold, the artist hammered these incredible scenes of capturing wild bulls, no less, from the inside out. Just look at the energy, the detail, the precision of the muscles on those bulls. This isn't just good craftsmanship, it's pure genius. This was a culture at the absolute top of its game.
And then, poof, it was gone. The palaces, destroyed. The art, vanished. The trade routes collapsed. So, what on earth happened?
Well, the answer came from the north. A new people. Waves of what were basically barbarian herdsmen started pouring down from the grasslands around the Danube River, and we know them today as the Greeks.
Now, this wasn't like a one-and-done invasion, not at all. It was a slow burn, a 1,000-year process of migration and conquest. The first wave, called the Aegeans, they started showing up around 2000 BC. Then came a second wave, the Dorians, who were a bit more aggressive. By 1400 BC, that big, open, undefended palace at Knossos, it fell. And then, around 1200 BC, one of the last great Aegean cities, Troy, was captured and burned to the ground. An event that, as you know, would echo down through history.
The destruction was total. The whole splendid Aegean world, their towns, their wonderful civilization, completely destroyed by the incoming Greek barbarians. This vibrant, colorful, sophisticated world of the Sea Kings was just wiped from the map. And for centuries after, a dark age fell. Writing was forgotten. Art became super basic. The population plummeted. It was a complete and utter collapse. Just catastrophic.
But, you know, out of all that destruction, something new started to take shape. History is rarely a clean slate, right? And this was definitely no exception.
See, a lot of the original Aegean people didn't just pack up and leave. They survived. And over hundreds of years, the conquerors and the conquered, they slowly merged. They intermingled. And this fusion of the tough, warlike invaders from the north with the artsy, seafaring Aegean survivors created a new mixed race, the Greeks of history, the people we recognize. Their language became Greek for sure, but their DNA, and probably a lot of their culture, that was a blend.
So the question is, how did this new, blended culture climb out of that dark age? How did they start building the civilization we all know and study? Well, they needed some new tools, new ideas, and new ways to remember where they came from.
And after 1000 BC, after centuries of being pretty isolated, new teachers started to arrive by sea. But this time, they weren't conquerors, they were traders. The Phoenicians, the great merchants of the Mediterranean, they started sailing into Greek harbors, and they brought more than just cool stuff to sell. They brought a gift that was going to change everything.
And that gift was the alphabet. This was a revolutionary system of just 22 signs for writing. It was invented by Semitic peoples like the Phoenicians, and it was the first system that didn't have all those complicated word signs or syllable signs. It was simple. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs, this was something almost anyone could learn. The Greeks grabbed it, added a few signs for vowels, and boom! For the first time since the fall of the Aegean world, writing was back in Europe.
So, with the power of writing back in their hands, what's one of the first things they do? They write down their hero songs. For generations, bards had been singing these epic poems about the Trojan War. Now, all those stories that were passed down orally could finally be written down, organized, and polished into the epic poems we know as the Iliad and the Odyssey. Just like that, the oldest literature in Europe was born.
All right, so we've got new tools for culture, trade, writing, and stories. Now let's look at new ways to live together, the city-state and the coin.
So this is super important. The Greeks didn't build a big, unified kingdom like Egypt. Instead, settled tribes formed villages, and those villages grew into cities, and each city became its own independent nation. Think about that. Each one had its own laws, its own army, its own gods. If you were a citizen, your patriotic duty was only to your city. An Athenian didn't care about Sparta. And pretty soon, hundreds of these little city-states were dotted all over the Aegean.
Then came another total game changer, but this time it was economic. Over in Lydia, which is nearby, some kings had a brilliant idea. They started stamping lumps of precious metal with an official seal. This guaranteed their weight and purity. And just like that, you have the world's first coins. The Greeks, who were born traders, saw this and adopted it like immediately, lightning speed.
And this one little invention completely flipped their society on its head. Look at this comparison. Old wealth was all about lands, flocks, and herds, and trading through barter. The powerful people were the noble landowners. But with new wealth, it was all about money or capital. You could use loans and interest, and this created a whole new class of people who weren't born into land, a prosperous middle class.
And what happens when you have a new, powerful middle class? Well, they start demanding a voice. They weren't going to just sit back and let the old landowners call all the shots. So, in cities like Athens, this new class demanded a say in government. And that pressure is what led to early experiment in democracy, under leaders like Solon and Clisthenes.
So let's step back. The Greeks created all this, literature, philosophy, democracy, and they did it in hundreds of fiercely independent little city-states. But here's the final question, the big one. Could their inability to unite, that fierce independence that was their greatest strength, also be their fatal flaw? Something to think about.